Imagine being woken in the middle of the night by the voice of God, not a feeling, not a hunch, His actual voice. And that voice tells you to take your son, your only son, the miracle child you waited 100 years for, and sacrifice him on a mountain. What would you do? How would you feel? This isn't just some ancient story. This is about the moment when faith meets the impossible. When what God asks makes absolutely no sense. When everything in you screams no, but faith whispers trust. Abraham stood at this crossroads, and what happened next would echo through history and into your life today. The story starts in Genesis 22. Abraham is now an old man who has seen the impossible. God gave him and Sarah a son when she was 90 years old. Isaac, the name means laughter. The fulfillment of a promise 25 years in the making, but then comes the test. The text simply says, God tested Abraham. These 4 words hide an earthquake of emotion. Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Try to feel what Abraham felt. This wasn't just any son. This was Isaac, the miracle child, the one through whom God promised to make Abraham's descendants as numerous as the stars, the son he waited a century to hold. The Bible doesn't show us Abraham arguing with God. It doesn't show him bargaining. We simply read, early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. But don't mistake this silence for emotionless obedience. Abraham was a man with a heart that could break, with hands that could tremble. Picture him that night. Did he sleep at all? Did he look at Isaac's face and wonder if it would be the last time? The next morning they set out. 3 days of traveling, 3 days of looking at your son, knowing what waits at the end of the journey. 3 days with your thoughts spiraling, questioning everything you thought you knew about God. Abraham tells his servants, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you. Did you catch that? We will come back. Even in the darkest moment of his life, Abraham clung to hope. He believed God would somehow make this right. As they walk together, Isaac asks the question that must have pierced Abraham's heart. Father, the fire and wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham answers, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. Was this just a way to avoid telling Isaac the truth? Or was it profound faith speaking? Abraham had learned through decades of walking with God that the Lord provides what he requires. They reach the mountain. Abraham builds an altar. He arranges the wood. And then the unthinkable, he binds his son and places him on the altar. Stop and really picture this scene. Isaac is not a small child. Tradition suggests he was in his 20s or 30s. He could have overpowered his elderly father. He could have run, but somewhere in this story, Isaac too submitted to God's will. Like father, like son, Abraham raises the knife. His arm is poised to strike. In his mind, Isaac is already dead. In his heart, he has already completed the sacrifice. And then, intervention. Abraham, here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Abraham looks up, and there in a thicket is a ram caught by its horns. A substitute, a provision. Just as he had told Isaac, God provided the sacrifice. But why? Why put Abraham through this nightmare? Why take him to the edge of this abyss? This is where the story transcends a simple test of obedience. This is where it becomes prophetic. The place where this happened, Mount Moriah, would later become Jerusalem. The very hill where Abraham prepared to sacrifice his son would eventually hold another hill called Golgotha. 2,000 years later, another father would willingly offer his only son. But this time there would be no ram in the thicket. This time the son would be the sacrifice. Abraham named that place the Lord will provide. In Hebrew, Jehovah Jireh. Not just God provided, past tense, but God will provide. Abraham saw beyond his moment into the future to the ultimate provision God would make. The parallels are stunning. A father's only beloved son, a journey of 3 days. Abraham's journey, Jesus in the tomb. The son carries the wood for the sacrifice. Isaac carried the wood. Jesus carried the cross. The willing submission of the son, the provision of God. But there's one crucial difference. For Abraham, God stopped the knife. For Jesus, the blade fell. The sacrifice was completed because that was the only way to fulfill what was pictured that day on Mount Moriah. So what does this mean for us today? How does this ancient story speak to your life right now? We all face our Mount Moriah moments. times when God asks us to surrender what matters most, times when obedience seems impossible, times when God's command makes no sense. Maybe for you it's a career you've built that God is asking you to walk away from, a relationship that feels essential, but God is asking you to release a dream you've cherished, that God is asking you to lay on the altar, security you've worked for that God is asking you to risk. The question becomes, do you trust God enough to sacrifice what you cannot imagine living without? Abraham teaches us that faith isn't about understanding God's plan. It's about trusting God's heart. Abraham didn't know how God would resolve the contradiction. He just knew that God would not break his promise. Hebrews 11:19 tells us, Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. His faith wasn't blind, it was informed by what he knew of God's character and promises. When God asks for what seems impossible, remember first, God only asks for what he has first given. Isaac was God's gift before he was Abraham's sacrifice. Second, what God requires, he provides for. The ram in the thicket wasn't an afterthought, it was God's plan all along. Third, sometimes the test is just to see if you'll obey, not to actually take what you love. Abraham passed the test without losing Isaac. Finally, our sacrifices always point to the sacrifice. Our surrender is merely an echo of Christ's. We never sacrifice alone. We join a sacred pattern that leads back to the cross. When Abraham descended that mountain with Isaac at his side, he was changed forever. He had a new name for God, Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide. He had a new understanding of God's faithfulness, and he had a new story to tell. You're facing your own mountain right now. Something God is asking you to surrender that feels impossible, something that makes no rational sense. What's your Isaac? What's the thing that feels too precious, too essential to your future, too bound up with who you are to possibly let go? As you stand at the foot of your mountain with your Isaac beside you, remember Abraham. Remember that the test is never about the sacrifice itself. It's about who sits on the throne of your heart. And remember that beyond the mountain, beyond the altar, beyond the knife, there waits a revelation of God you can't imagine. A new name for God that only this journey can teach you. This is your moment of decision. Will you, like Abraham, rise early tomorrow and begin the journey? Will you trust when it makes no sense? Your Moriah mountain is waiting, and so is your God.